Hello, everyone. I'm Sandra Bargman, and welcome back to The Edge of Everyday, now streaming on all your favorite podcast platforms and at maximizeyou.life. Are you a change maker? Do you walk between worlds, between cultures, between systems? If you answered yes to any of these questions, The Edge of Everyday is the place for you. In a nutshell, this podcast is about pushing boundaries and exploring rough edges. Through conversations and shared stories with friends and colleagues, it's my hope that we can begin to understand our edges. And what I mean by edges is those places where we are fearful, those places where we are resistant to change, those places where paradox and contradicting identities live in our beliefs and in our understandings, both individually and collectively. We live in edgy, challenging times. We cannot keep looking away from the ugly, from the difficult, and silence is no longer an option. Life isn't black or white, it's both, and I want to talk about that. I want to face the tension of paradox, and I want to engage in the hard conversations. I want to explore the rough edges between our light-filled brilliance and our dark, shadowy corners, because the more we recognize our own edges and get real about them, the more we can help others to do the same. And that, I fully believe, can help to change the world. So, thanks for tuning in. Today, we are live in the hive with Brian Gorman, maverick leadership coach and author of Leading into the Age of Wisdom, Reimagining the Future of Work. Brian writes, when hierarchies falter, networks and circles emerge. When loyalty contracts dissolve, people seek belonging and purpose. When change accelerates, organizations must cultivate adaptability and rhythm. When technology grows powerful, the human role shifts from doing the work of machines to bringing discernment, empathy, and wisdom into the system. This book is a must-read for leaders, change makers, and wayfinders. As we witness the collapse of institutions and systems both nationally and globally in real time, media, finance, education, religion, etc., alongside the meteoric rise of artificial intelligence technology, organizations, corporations, and work life have been called to evolve. And to meet these fast-changing times, leadership has been called to evolve as well. As Klaus Schwab writes in The Fourth Industrial Evolution, the changes are so profound that from the perspective of human history, there's never been a time of greater promise or greater peril. In this episode, we'll explore these questions. Is our dystopian view that AI is replacing humankind true or false? What is the relationship between storytelling, change, and wisdom? And a reflection question from Brian's book that I loved. Which beliefs, habits, or assumptions about leadership may need to be unlearned or reframed for me to become an age of wisdom leader? Love that. So excited for this conversation, but before we dive in, let me share Brian's bio. Brian Gorman is a change leadership expert, trusted advisor, coach, speaker, and circle keeper to executives and organizations navigating disruption. With decades of experience guiding leaders through transformation, he integrates neuroscience, storytelling, and collective wisdom practices to help organizations thrive in complexity. He's coached hundreds of leaders globally and is known for his ability to blend head, heart, and gut in practical ways that inspire action and sustain change. Brian is the author of Leading into the Age of Wisdom, Reimagining the Future of Work. Welcome, Brian Gorman.
Sandra, it is such an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. It is an honor to have you on. And can I tell you, listeners, that I adored this book. I inhaled this book. I loved everything. It flowed so beautifully. It was inspiring. And I loved the layout of it too, Brian, the way you brought all the questions back to the end and you had um, it just organized it so beautifully. The three segments, the way it all flowed, it was tremendous.
Thank you. As I write in the book, this is not a book to read and put down. It
Yes.
really is a book for leaders at all levels of organizational life to
Mm,
live with. And so, as I was putting it all together, each chapter ends with questions for reflection.
yeah.
And I invite the reader to not only reflect on those questions themselves, but bring them to others in their organization to reflect on. But again, as I was bringing it all together, I realized if those questions just sit at the end of the chapter, they're not really all that accessible once the reader has completed the book. And so they are among the things that I pulled them all together again in the appendix.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. So many resources, great quotes in addition to Brian's wisdom. Just fantastic. So I love to tell my listeners how I know my guests, and I had the great good pleasure of meeting Brian. Finally, I knew him and had seen him through our Edgewalker community, and I'd seen him in cafes. And for those of you listening in, you've heard me mention Edgewalkers. Check out all of their cafes, and you will find some with Brian in them. Go to edgewalkers.org. Brian and I are also facilitators for Edgewalkers, and we recently met in person in Fayetteville at Judy Neal's home, Dr. Judy Neal, founder of Edgewalkers, and it was a wonderful few days together. It feels like
Absolutely.
yesterday and 500 years ago since we did that.
It does. It does. It was it was October.
October, yeah. Well, kind of like what you talk about in your book about, change. Change is speeding up, time is speeding up, things are warping, turning into circles and spirals out of linear. Yeah. Ah, I can't wait to get into all of that, but I'm going to ask you first what I ask all of my guests. What identity do you lead with? What identity do you, Brian Gorman, lead with?
My honest identity.
You're say it again. You're what? You're
My honest identity.
honest. Yeah. Excellent. I love that answer.
I am many, many things, if you will.
Indeed.
You name them, and none of them have any credibility if I'm not the one that shows up.
Right. Love that. Indeed, we talk about masks as identity and all the different roles we play and how we can be so attached to those identities. So to just show up as your honest, real self, it's just, and step into whatever is called for. It's beautiful. Just beautiful. Okay, so let's dive in, my friend. So is our dystopian view of the world that AI is going to take over humankind true or false? I mean, we know it can't be one or the other. And I'm sure you will give a great explanation about
Yeah.
that. Walk us through that and walk us through what's the difference between intelligence and wisdom.
So the answer of to the question is that dystopian view of where we're heading, true or false, is yes. We are at or very close to a tipping point that will take us in one direction or the other. Um, this book came out of hearing that voice that said AI will replace factory workers. AI will replace frontline white collar workers. And a tech CEO saying AI will replace me. And in my gut, something said, there's something wrong here. Is this inevitable? And what aren't we talking about?
Mm.
And as I began to reflect on that, and actually, let me back up, Sandra.
Mm.
One of my superpowers is looking a little bit over the horizon.
Like a good edge walker.
And by 2021, when we were experiencing what I call the Great Reflection, most people refer to as the Great Resignation, I started saying out loud, we are on the verge of the equivalent of the Industrial Revolution. I felt AI pushed us even further in that direction. And then as I began to reflect on this, I realized that AI has some incredible power. AI can level the playing field for anyone who has access in terms of our intelligence. It doesn't matter what my IQ is anymore. And there is something that each of us uniquely carries that AI doesn't have, and that's wisdom. The simplest definition I have comes from a conversation about the difference with ChatGPT. And ChatGPT said, artificial intelligence can tell you how to do anything. Wisdom will tell you whether or not to do it. Wisdom is discernment. Wisdom is judgment. Um, for just a very quick and simple and easy business example, intelligence may tell us to launch a new product that we have in the pipeline. And when we sit down and we think about the impact of that product on people, on communities, on nations, our ethical sense tells us no. While this would be a profitable product, while this would raise our share, our stock value in the market, ethically, this is the wrong thing to do. That's wisdom.
Of course, question is whether or not corporations choose to follow that advice, which goes back to are we going to evolve, and is it going to be dystopian, to your point? I loved your quote here when you in your book, you said intelligence, that chat GPT, when you ask that, intelligence solves problems. Wisdom sees patterns. Intelligence informs decisions. Wisdom guides them. Leadership today demands both, but it's wisdom that keeps us human. I so loved that. Yeah. So, you know, I was telling somebody recently that I was having you on the show, and how much I was looking forward to it. And this is someone who was somewhat afraid and unsure about AI. And I asked them, well, what do you think wisdom is? And they what they could come up with was really just someone who gives good advice, someone who's had great experience. And I shouldn't say all that they come up with, but it didn't seem to be a full understanding to, well, it didn't seem, of course, it wasn't a full understanding of wisdom. Um, so talk to us, get a little more deep into what you talk about with wisdom. I mean, in the leadership, in the age of wisdom, what do leaders need to be developing in the age of wisdom.
I recently wrote a paper in the last 6 weeks, I think, titled Lessons from the Steam Engine, AI Leadership in the Age of Wisdom. If we go back, and my background is, my undergraduate degree is cultural anthropology. If we take that lens and look back at the invention of the steam engine and how that impacted society, how that the economic impact, the cultural impact, there are some tremendous lessons that we can learn. And many of those lessons reflect the right decision in the moment that put us on a destructive path going forward. Wisdom, again, is learning those lessons as we make our decisions with artificial intelligence. One of those destructive paths, or it made sense at the time, it doesn't make sense anymore, is our traditional hierarchical organization, which assumes wisdom resides at the top. Wisdom resides in every individual in that organization, whether or not the organization calls on that wisdom. And in the book, I write of one example. I write of several examples, but I'm going to give one here. If you're of a certain age, you remember Blockbuster. And you'd go to Blockbuster and you'd wander the aisles and you'd find your VHS, or I don't even remember if Blockbuster advanced
DVD. They
DVDs
did.
at a time.
Yes.
And then they wanted to really make their money by buying their popcorn and all of those kinds of things. And then you take your movie home and the phone would ring or the kid would scream, and the movie sat there longer than the checkout time that you had to view it. And you said, well, I'll pay the overdue fees because I really want to see this movie. Well, at one point in their evolution, and Blockbuster was a blockbuster, it was in the Fortune 500.
Yeah, it was monster.
At one point, they realized those late fees were such an incredible source of revenue that they literally hired a PR firm to develop a campaign to convince subscribers to Blockbuster of the goodness of having to pay late fees. And then Netflix came along. The founders of Netflix were $50 million in debt. They literally went to the CEO of Blockbuster and said, for $50 million, you can now own Netflix. Netflix is still here. Blockbuster is gone. The wisdom in the C-suite is no longer sufficient for today's challenges. We see this over and over and over again. I'm a photographer. Who invented digital photography? Kodak. Kodak. If they had realized that their real value was in image capture and storage, not in manufacturing film, they would still be at the top of the game, would be buying Kodak memory cards.
Yeah.
The people that invented the digital camera knew this, but nobody would ask them because they were down in the weeds. Mm-hmm. Leaders today need to realize that they are not the sole source of wisdom in their organizations. And I'll give you just one more example. And this I learned within the last month. And I'm going to wait until Sandra finishes sipping her water. The octopus has 9 brains. There is a central brain. That is about 30% of its brain power. Each tentacle has its own independently functioning brain. And each of those 8 brains coordinates and stays aligned through what's called a neural necklace. Great book. I'm actually having one of the authors on my podcast next month. AI and the Octopus Organization. They argue, and I don't use the octopus metaphor, but talk about the same thing in terms of networked organizations. They argue that to remain nimble, to remain agile in today's environment, we need to dismantle the corporate brain, not eliminate it, but distribute its ability to think and to make decisions out into the organization in those multiple tentacles that each organization has. That's where wisdom needs to start. AI can provide that neural network necklace. AI can help ensure alignment, but AI can't make the decisions.
Yeah. I love that the octopus makes me think of the Octopus Teacher, the movie, which is where I learned 9 brains. Um, and it makes me think of you with the mind brain, the heart brain, and the gut brain that you weave together so deliciously in the book. But the thing that I want to move into next, not again, is I couldn't help but the entire time I was reading the book, think about how our democracy and the systems on our planet, and quite frankly, capital patriarchy is in need of this hierarchical breakdown. I mean, you can overlay democracy on this and the hierarchy of authoritarianism and the quote unquote efficiency and the speed with which things are done, because democracy that supports DEI, that supports all the differences, that takes the viewpoints of their people into account, takes much more time, takes much more patience. And I mean, the wisdom that you lay out and the leadership skills are all of the skills that we need in our political landscape, around the world. I mean, and that's what we're seeing emerging. But I mean, I couldn't not think about democracy while reading your book. And so what are your thoughts on that?
In all candor, it's not a lens that I have specifically brought to my own thinking.
Oh,
Um, but I think you raised some important points, and I want to pick up on one. You mentioned DEI,
yeah.
and I talk about DEI in the book,
Mhm.
not in terms of DEI alone, because diversity, equity, and inclusion
Inclusion,
are the levers, but they're the levers to achieve belonging.
indeed.
And in the book, I talk about the fact that belonging is neither politically correct nor politically incorrect. Belonging is a strategic imperative. Because if I work for you, Sandra, and I don't feel like I belong, even if I feel like I can fit in,
Very different.
you're not going to get the best from me.
Mhm.
You are not going to get the best from me. If I don't feel like I belong, I'm not sure how much I can trust you. And if I'm not sure how much I can trust you, I'm not sure what I am going to reveal to you, what I'm going to share with you. Whether I'm going to say, Sandra, I'm hearing this increasing voice of our customers saying, please X. I need to feel like I belong. I need to feel like I'm valued. If you're the leader that keeps on canceling our one-on-ones because something else is more important than me, I don't feel like I belong. I don't feel like I matter. And if you're not going to give me the best of you as my leader, why should I give you the best of me?
Absolutely. But back to the democracy thing, and not, I mean, that's how marginalized people feel around the country, around the globe. And I mean, in terms of thinking of this overlaid onto democracy and AI, um, replacing talent, we don't have talent. As you so wisely pointed out, I was like, absolutely. We don't have talent. People, they're blocking immigration, the talent from around the world. This regime is blocking it. Um, there's a low birth rate. Women are not, if you're going to take away my rights, I'm not going to, agency over my body. We're not going to go there. We're not having babies. Thank you very much. Um, so this authoritarian hierarchical way of thinking, yeah, I just couldn't help but think about how patriarchy at the top as the umbrella, the overarching thing, that corporations, that capitalism, that all of our systems plug into need the overlay of the wisdom leader and your wisdom circles and the reconnection to bringing people back into the conversation, back into sharing their wisdom, back into let's take a consensus here. And yes, it's not as efficient potentially. It doesn't produce in what stereotypically has been the quickest way, per se. But, I'm sure there's an argument against if everyone's included, ultimately, it's the productivity is going to go up because people are going to want, to your point, going to want to contribute. They feel like they belong. So,
A couple of things to say there. Um, One is that it isn't necessarily slower.
yes, yes,
In
well said.
fact,
Yes.
um, many of us remember General Stanley McChrystal, who was in charge of the armed forces in Iraq that were responsible for countering the terrorists. And we were doing a lousy, lousy job of that. McChrystal had the best Rangers, he had the best SEALs, he had the best spies, he had the best intelligence, he had the best technology. And I would get information from my sources and I would feed it up my chain of command and they would feed it across the upper echelons of the chain of command and they would decide what some other chain of command should take action to counter the terrorist activity. And by then, another installation was bombed or another suicide bomber had taken the lives of people in the town square or whatever. And McChrystal, now remember, this is the US military, our traditional, as we think about it, hierarchy of hierarchies.
Oh yeah. Which please insert real quick why you know this, that you were how you know this. Weave that in.
Yeah, I'll come.
Come back to that.
I'll
Great.
come back to that at the end. McChrystal established a whole new way of functioning called Team of Teams, and it was the equivalent of the octopus's brains.
Yes.
If I have this intelligence, there are a few of us who might figure out what resources we need to take action. And we bring that together. We inform, not ask permission, of the higher ups. We are in line with the mission. We're clear on the intent of why we are all here. We know best what's happening on the ground. We make the decision, we take the action, and we win it this time. Decentralizing power, decentralizing decision making. Doesn't slow things down. I know this because 2 or 3 years ago, maybe a little bit longer now, I was working with an organization that was, I think, itself over a century old. The vast majority of its workers are blue-collar workers. And they had a new CEO. And the CEO went around and he literally spent months on a listening tour. And he came back and he said, we need to change our basics way in which we are functioning. Mm-hmm. And there's no secret of the organization, so I'm going to put it out there because there are some facts that are important here. It was Norfolk Southern Railroad, based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And they brought McChrystal's, the McChrystal group in to work with their senior leadership. And then based on that framework, they brought the leadership development company that I was working with at the time, who's no longer in business, but they brought us in to work with the next tiers of leaders. And the first group that I worked with was transportation. They were the people who ran the trains. They were the people who worked in the rail yards. They were the doers of the railroad. And at the time, we began with a workshop with Quantivos, the company I was with, and Covey. And what we were looking to establish was something very simple. These are the behaviors we need to start in order to become a team of teams division. These are the behaviors we need to stop. And I will never forget in that workshop, one of the people was asked, how do you respond in crisis? And he said, we circle the wagons and shoot inward. Think about that. We circle the wagons and shoot inward. It's their fault. It's their fault. It's not me. It's someone else. They had a brilliant head of transportation at the time. He came in to the workshop one day. So before we get started, we have a new dress code as of tomorrow. Button-down shirt, can be dress or polo, and jeans or khakis. And literally, one of these senior leaders jumped up from his seat and said, but I like my dress pants. And the division leader said, like them on your own time. They symbolize a separation between us and the people that we are leaving, that we no longer want to symbolize. So I'll wrap the story up. We all remember Norfolk Southern Railroad before the derailment in Ohio. We actually had to pause work for several months while they addressed that, and then they came back together. And I asked the question, what was your culture like as you were working together on this railroad? And they said, we circled the wagons and pulled together. Team of teams.
Beautiful. It's a great story and great evolution. Well, I wanted to talk about your wisdom circles and I wanted to share with our listeners how you recognized and gravitated to your understanding that you were comfortable, may not be the proper word, but that you wanted to explore change, that you were someone who sought out change, who was comfortable with the understanding of change.
So now we have to go back to 1967.
I know. I've heard this story and I love it.
I was 17 years old, an Eagle Scout, and a freshman at Syracuse University, and I was also an introvert. And I had decided that when I went to college, I was going to change how I showed up in the world. So I joined a fraternity. I joined Alpha Phi Omega, which was the national service fraternity. We didn't have a house. We had an office on the fourth floor of the men's gym. And instead of partying, I volunteered to do youth work on the nearby Onondaga Reservation. Mm-hmm. I quickly learned that the university's portrayal of its mascot was racist and xenophobic. The mascot was the Saltine Warrior, a Native American figure, portrayed by Caucasian fraternity brothers dressed up like Hollywood Indians and running around as if they were, and sometimes, even though at least my freshman year alcohol wasn't allowed on campus, actually being drunk. And I tried for my 4 years of undergraduate time at Syracuse to get them to change the mascot. They didn't. It took the Onondaga Nation, I think, another 6 years after that. But this spark in me about change was ignited and has flowed through every aspect of my life ever since.
Yeah. So good. I was born in Syracuse, Brian. I was right down the road, little me, right down the road while you were going through all of this. So
you had mentioned wisdom circles.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to move
That's
there.
exactly where I was moving. I was looking for your quote on wisdom circles to bring us into that.
While in undergraduate, I changed my major from architecture to cultural anthropology and really spent some time becoming knowledgeable about indigenous cultures here in North America. And one of the things that came out of that, well, there are two that I want to mention and that I address in the book. The first is the seventh generation principle. I believe that we had made some progress in returning toward a seventh generation principle with our environmental movement until recently. The seventh generation principle doesn't ask, is this the right decision for this quarter? It asks, what will be the impact of this decision over the next 7 generations? We're talking about long-term sustainability. We're talking about long-term survival. And that becomes a really good question for which way we go with AI. The other thing I learned about were wisdom circles, and wisdom circles appear in indigenous cultures globally. For most people, the best analogy I can make is that wisdom circles are the being equivalent of masterminds. We don't come together in a wisdom circle to solve a problem. We don't come together in a wisdom circle to hash out a project plan. We come to a wisdom circle to nurture our own wisdom and the collective wisdom of others. We develop wisdom from one another. We share our wisdom. I was just talking with someone else about wisdom circles before we got together this afternoon. And he said, how do you come up with your topic? And I said, I have a list of, right now, hundreds of topics that we all might become wiser about. And I have recently begun offering complimentary wisdom circles. And so just to name a few, our first wisdom circle that I offered right before the holidays was building and sustaining energy. How do we build and sustain our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual energy? Our work is not done through time, it's done through energy. And so if we individually and collectively can get better at energy management, we'll get much better at getting our work done. Wisdom Circle a couple of weeks ago focused on trust. How do we build and sustain trust? How do we be better at trusting and being trusted? Have a circle coming up on Saturday on restraint as responsibility. In this age when we're being pushed to make decisions faster, take more action, take quicker action, restraint takes on increasing importance. I have 2 coming up right now in February. One, the day before Thanksgiving, is on the role of love in leadership. And I talk about this in the book. Love is a leadership value, a leadership behavior, a leadership way of being. So on February 13th, we're having a wisdom circle on love, the role of love in leadership.
Yeah. It's beautiful. You said Thanksgiving, but you meant Valentine's Day.
Yes.
But it's also Valentine's Day. We give thanks for love. It's wonderful.
Then February 28th, the last one I currently have on the books, is wayfinding when maps no longer work.
I love it. Yeah.
As leaders today, the maps are no longer working.
And since COVID, those maps are not even there anymore.
In many cases, yeah.
I mean, all of these circles, and of course, and I can overlay everything you've just said, overlay that on my activism work. It's not just corporations, it's for life.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely for life. But for me personally, everything flowed back to, my political activism, and because that's very prescient to me right at the moment.
Right.
And I'm not part of corporate life. I'm a part of corporate life when I have a client that's in corporate life that I'm working with on storytelling and presence and voice work. But that's wonderful. And I've reached out to you. You've reached out to me. I'd like to attend your pre-Valentine Day one, if there's room. I know it's
There
only a
is room. There
certain
is room.
number
We
of
keep them
people.
small. They're about 6 or 7 people max.
It's glorious. Here's the quote that I was looking for to bring us into the circles. The universe is circles within circles, and everything is one circle, and all the circles are connected to each other. Black elk, I love that. And I so appreciate the circular way of understanding life and the interconnectedness of all of life and the enormous need to return to that around the globe, return to that deep, deep wisdom that resides in all of us.
If that is, again, that whole circle philosophy, if you will. We all know it.
Mhm.
We've all heard the Lion King song, Circle of Life. And yet we live as if all of this will come to an end. And if that's the way we live, then that's the path we're choosing.
And so it is. Well, Brian, I'm looking at the time, and this has been such an incredible conversation. I thank you so much for joining me on the Edge of Everyday podcast and sharing your wisdom and your leadership and your inspiration and your presence. It's so deliciously grounded, and your stories. I have a million more questions. We'll have to have you back. But for now, where can our guests find you? I mean, where can our
So
listeners find you?
obviously, I'm on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
My website is transforminglives.coach. And my email is Brian, Brian, at transforminglives.coach.
Wonderful. And check out Brian's podcast, Conversations with a Q. Conversations with a Q. I listened to a few of those in doing my research on you, and I so enjoyed them.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we're going to close out, folks, with a wonderful thought, prayer, understanding of life that is in Brian's book. I'm going to ask him to read it as our closing out ceremony.
Thank you. Just for context, ChatGPT, primarily ChatGPT, was my research assistant and my brainstorming partner throughout the writing of the book. And as I reached, and I'm reading this from the afterword, as I reached the end of completing the first draft of the manuscript, I asked ChatGPT for a closing reflection. It appears below. I believe it is a beautiful example of the heart of the book. AI was able to capture simply and eloquently the key messages of leading into the age of wisdom. But only you and your wisdom circles can fully understand the message. Only you and your wisdom circles can draw from the intelligence of AI and discern which parts of this reflection are most relevant to your journey in this moment. Only you and your wisdom circles can truly experience what it means to lead into the age of wisdom. And so here is that reflection. May you lead with courage when the path is unclear. May you listen for what wants to emerge, even in the quiet. May you remember that the wisdom you seek is already within you and also among you. May your leadership be an act of love, your presence a source of grounding, and your vision a light for the path ahead. Lead not to control, but to liberate. Lead not to be followed, but to walk together. This is the work. This is the way. This is leadership in the age of wisdom.
Thank you, Brian Gorman.
Thank you, Sandra.
And my loyal listeners, remember, you are always at the edge of the miraculous. Until we speak again, take good care.